morning, everybody. Thank you for being here on such a beautiful morning in November. You're always welcome to come to the Community Sector Council. We love to have you. My name is Darlene Scott. I work here with a bunch of amazing people. Curtis Delaney is in charge of technical things this morning, so you can say hi to him. Our CEO is with us, Penelope Rowe. Hi, Penny. Glad to have you with us. So this is always, when you come to the Community Sector Council, there's always a chance to network and meet new people. So look around. We have a few little door prizes, so if you have not put your business card or a little door prize slip of paper in there, you can. You're welcome to that, and I'll pull a few of those a little bit later in the morning. We are being live streamed this morning via Facebook. So we do have our lights up, so sorry about a little bit of glare on the screen, but we do have to keep the lights up in the room for the live stream. And that will be put up on our YouTube video when we get it finished. Now, this is actually the third presentation in our 2019 speaker series at the Community Sector Council. Earlier in the year, we had an amazing workshop on storytelling, effective storytelling in the sector. Just very recently, we had a wonderful workshop on adaptive leadership by Tamarack. And our fourth, so this is our third, so our fourth and final for 2019 speaker is actually going to be David Strong. Many of you will know him as an account manager at ACOA, but he's pretty much an expert in community-based strategic planning, and he's going to have a talk on December 11th in this room, starting at 10 a.m., around participatory strategic planning and whether your organization is ready to do strat planning. So that should be an interesting room, and it's starting to fill up. So go online to our website and you can register for that as well. And also watch the website for some 2020 speakers. Probably the first one that we're going to get out the gate is going to be around recruiting millennials and younger persons in the voluntary sector. Recruiting young people is on everybody's mind. So I would like to welcome Paul Preston, who is the Chief Executive Officer of NATI. He has an impressive bio. I'm not going to read it to you because you can do that at your leisure. We've handed it out to you, but it is impressive, and we're really glad to have Paul back in Newfoundland. He was educated here, spent a few years up in Ottawa helping the Conference Board of Canada keep things straight. So if you want to talk about policy, industry, academia, and tech, Paul's our guy. NATI is actually a partner with the Community Sector Council in one of our newest tech projects called Techno Tutors, and that's about helping people who are not online get online. That's been funded by the Government of Canada, and it should be in place for a little bit more than 2 more years. So watch the website for events around that as well. The interesting connection with NATI is that they've agreed to assist us, for example, when we're looking at equipment supplies or curriculum. So thank you for that partnership, Paul.
Live stream, stay where you are. Thank you very much for hosting me and having me today. I thought to start, to your point about Q&A, throughout the presentation I'll pose questions to you, that type of thing, and ask a question. We'll leave ample time at the end. I'm going to talk no more than half an hour with some intermix. I have some videos to show throughout. Lots of time for Q&A at the end. There's lots of smart people in this room, so I want to leverage your expertise as well. Maybe to start, just so we all know who's here, can maybe do a bit of a round the room, name and the organization you're with, so we all have a sense. We'll start in the back left corner.
Hi, Leon Mills, Canadian Hard Ferries Association, Newfoundland and Labrador.
Awesome.
I'm Kim Lindstrom, and I'm with the Murphy Centre.
Okay.
Audrey Wade, and I'm with the Murphy Centre as well.
Awesome. Maybe back on this side.
Yeah, Terry Nolan, and I'm with Access Career Services with ANC.
Mike Robinson, also with Access Career Services at ANC.
Hi, I'm Paul Foote. I'm with the Office of the Chief Information Officer with the Provincial Government.
Yep.
Hello, Murphy, Office of Chief Information Officer, Provincial Government.
Excellent.
Andrew Smith, Design Smith. We do process improvements.
Pauline Martin with the Community Foundation of Newfoundland and Labrador.
Okay, sounds good. Maybe go right in the very back.
Jackie Reed, Program Developer, College of North Atlantic.
Corey Weir, Community Sector Council, Newfoundland and Labrador.
Good morning, Derek Barrett. I'm the Manager of Labour Market Information, Department of Advanced Education, Skills and Labour.
Kenny Rowe, Community Sector Council, Newfoundland and Labrador.
I'm Amy Henderson. I'm with Business and Arts, Newfoundland and Labrador.
I'm Lindsay Baird, and I'm with McGinnis Cooper. Anna Wadden, and I'm with McGinnis Cooper.
Jason Rolls, Director of Program Development, College of North Atlantic.
Trudy Barnes, I'm with College of North Atlantic.
Sherry Vosh, I'm with Women in Resource Development Corporation.
Sue Hammond with NL Prostate Cancer Support.
Ice from White Rock Communication Consultants.
Steve Kavanagh with Innovation Canada.
And last but not least,
Cecilia Booker from Filipino Land Women's Organization.
awesome. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to actually turn on my timer, so I'll keep myself honest to the 30-minute time window here. I didn't want to go through my bio. I am from this province originally, though. I did want to get that across and clear. I grew up all over different towns in Newfoundland. My father was a Scotiabanker back when they moved bank families every 3 or 4 years. So I grew up in small towns, lived in St. John's a couple of times. Grew up living above the bank. You wouldn't do that now, put the bank manager and his kids and his wife above the Scotiabank, but back in the early 80s, that's what you did. So I'm from literally every part of Newfoundland and Labrador. Did my university education, my degrees here. Went away to Ottawa back in 04, 05. I worked for 15 years based out of Ottawa, but I did move back to this province a number of years ago. But my job, my staff, was all in Ottawa. So I was doing the back and forth and traveling around the world type thing for a number of years. So when the NATI role came up, I had a number of people I knew and mentors that were here that said, there's something going on in the tech sector. You should consider putting your name in the hat. Maybe you want to run for the role. There's something special going on between Genesis, Memorial Center for Entrepreneurship, the kinds of companies we have here. There's more immigrants coming in. There's a focus on getting underrepresented groups involved in the tech sector. Every sector of the economy here is looking at how do we go digital. So there was something in the air. It was kind of highly recommended, put your name in the hat. So I've been at NATI literally a year this week. So I've been there for a year now, so I can't say I'm new anymore. But it has been amazing, the things that have happened even in this year. And I'm going to highlight a couple of those things. The past 3 months in particular, we're seeing the fruits of our labor that this place has been doing for about 10 years and more. So I'll cover some of that as we go through. So maybe just to give you a sense of the sector and the size, we always said, NATI had always had data that showed about 1.6 billion is the sector, the tech sector. APEC, I think most of you know APEC, think tank based in Atlantic Canada. Their models show you absolutely in excess of 1.5 billion is the tech sector. So the numbers are accurate. There's about, we suspect actually closer to about 200 pure tech companies now in the province, employing 4,000 people. If you consider people working in roles that are highly tech enabled, so they maybe they're in a different sector, an oil and gas supply company, but really it's really, really tech enabled. The number is more like 8,700 people that work kind of in tech-based roles. So it's a robust sector. Average salaries are higher here than other parts of the country, believe it or not, in the tech sector, and that has to do with demand for the skill sets. We don't have enough tech people here for the jobs available, and I'll cover a bit of that. For context, 1.6 billion might not mean anything, but for context, that's bigger than tourism, that's bigger than farming, and that's bigger than traditional fishery as well. So as a sector, it's bigger than those sectors of the economy. You might not know that. Traveling back and forth across the country on Air Canada, it's amazing how often I'd see the lovely Newfoundland ads, right? And you're sitting in a chair, and you're sitting on a flight and you see the Newfoundland tourism ads about coming to Newfoundland. And I think we spend something like $13 million as a province on those ads. It drives an economy that's about $1 billion tourism economy. $13 billion, pretty good investment. So what we're trying to say is in technology innovation, can we get more support, some more focus on how do we drive our tech sector forward? What kind of government supports and programming can help that? So just for context, who NATI is, it's been around for 30 years. Our strategic plan, our goal is to really help our members, the tech sector, create new possibilities. And that's just not about dollars in the pocket. That's social enterprise. It's about improving the lives of people that live and work and want to come here. But it's also about taking our brand. We have something unique to offer on the world stage, being here and being from this place. So we can scale and grow tech companies anywhere in the world, so why not here in this province? So our role as an association, how do we help our members? How do we help the tech sector create new possibilities? We have three core priorities. I'm almost on the boilerplate. 3 core priorities. The number 1 for us is talent development to fuel the sector growth. Company like I think most of you would know Verafin lately has had some great news. Let's continue to see them grow. They're going to hire a few hundred people in the next 3 to 5 years. Yet, between our college and the university, we're producing about 50 grads a year. So if they're going to hire 500 and we're producing 50, what are we going to do? Immigration's part of it, but I think underrepresented groups, getting people back to work, getting older people to stay in the workforce longer, we're going to need all of that to be able to meet demand. If we don't, these companies and those jobs will go elsewhere. And there's already examples of that where companies are having to look elsewhere. So talent development, fueling the talent pipeline, is a big goal for us. And I'll share some details on what we're doing there. Programs that help companies grow and scale. So we do a number of things at NATI. Some of it is about going to unique markets. For example, if you're doing machine learning, AI, there's a big thing taking place in London. We're going to have 16 Atlantic companies that are going to go over, and we will lead a group of companies that go there, for example, about setting up new partnerships, new relationships, contracts. So we do some of that kind of growth programming to help companies grow and scale. And a shout out goes to ACOA and the province's TCII, Tourism, Culture, Innovation, Industry, that group. I think most of you know TCII. Shout out goes to both of those government organizations. They support a lot of the work we do around this pillar as well, in terms of programming to support the sector. And the last priority for us, it's advocacy and digital transformation. So that's what I'm doing today. It's about how big is the sector? Does it really drive our economy? How important it is? But I mentioned us being a sector of 1.6 billion. We're also a critical enabler for every other sector of the economy. Think oil and gas, aquaculture, manufacturing. Tech is in everything. So we're not just a standalone sector. We also enable every Newfoundland sector to compete globally. Frankly, without tech in those traditional sectors, we can't compete globally. We can't compete on labor. We can't compete on commodity price. It's tech and innovation we need to adopt. That's the boilerplate stuff done. This is what I wanted to cover today. This was in the description for this session as well. I have some data. Some of it I'll share. I work for the Conference Board of Canada. If you don't know who they are, they're a think tank, not part of government, about 230 people. I worked there for 10 and a half years, and the role was really understanding global trends. How do we compare in Canada? How do the provinces compare? So I'll share some data that I've taken from the Conference Board, as well as some StatsCan data to show how we compare in Newfoundland, where we're strong, where there's some work to do, and really just to ground our discussion about some of the recommendations we need to make. So what do we mean by innovation? There's the great fancy definitions you can find all over the place. Comes down to two things. Innovation's something new, but it's only an idea until it provides value. So for it to be an innovation, it has to be something novel, and it has to provide value, social or economic value. So when I talk about supporting our tech sector growth, it's not just about for-profit enterprise, it's social enterprise. There's some great examples here in this province, and you see that more and more. So, not to start, this, if you think about shuttles and rocket ships, obviously there's innovation involved, but I really wanted to show two images just to prove my point and to help define what we mean by innovation and technology. So, too often we think of innovation as being something radical, something that's a huge leap forward, and it's programming, it's tech. Really, it's about continuous improvement as well. It's about continuous process improvement, making things better over time, making it better. I think Andrew Smith, you understand this intrinsically with the work you do about how design and how improving design can improve functionality and improve value. So when I show the space shuttle, this is a great story to prove my point. So if you look at the shuttle, you look at the rocket, the little land rocket engines here at the end that are placed on the shuttle. And why are they as big as they are? Why did they decide to use the number they did, etc.? Why are they the diameter they are? There was some limiting factors. So they weren't made in Canaveral, they were made in a different part of the US, and they had to be shipped on flatbeds. So to be shipped on flatbeds, some areas and towns it would go through were narrow streets. So you really had to be careful how wide you made the engines here, the nozzles, how wide they were, because you had to ship it from one part of the US to another part through towns and infrastructure and roads. So that had to be considered in the design, right? Well, why were the roads the width they were? Why are roads in the US towns, why are they that width? Well, you have cars, you have two seats side by side, and transport trucks, they're a certain width, and that width of transport trucks and cars was defined by the size of roads. Why were roads the size they were? Well, originally the roads were modeled after kind of, you think about axles on trains and how wide a train axle would have been. On the gauge is about 4 feet, 8.5 inches wide was the kind of the gauge, somewhere in that realm for trains. So the road network was sort of modeled after the rail network, and cars were modeled after the axle, okay, about 4 feet, 8.5 inches wide. Well, why were trains? Why was it decided trains could be 4 feet, 8.5 inches wide? Well, because in Europe, when we first got a deep train networks being developed, there were old roads, which were the horse and carriage road. And when were they built? They were built in Roman times. So Romans built a lot of roads throughout Europe, 2,000-3,000 years ago. And they knew to haul men, to haul materials, you typically need 2 horses to pull a carriage. So 2 horses with the axles of the wheels behind it. So they built a road network that really was about the width of 2 arses of a horse side by side. So I tell this story some argue this is not actually how it happened, but anyway. I tell the story just that the size of a rocket booster can be dictated by 2 horses side by side 2,000 or 3,000 years ago. It's that continuous improvement. We don't always see how we build innovation upon systems and upon things that have come before. But what happens is, eventually this is SpaceX, someone comes along and says, okay, we need to completely rethink how we design rockets. We need to completely rethink reusability. We need to completely rethink the technologies that go on it. So whereas a shuttle launch was about $400 million, with reusability in SpaceX, I think they just had a launch which was the 4th time they reused one of the boosters. And they come back to Earth, they re-land back to Earth. They completely rebuilt rocket ships and how they design rocket ships. They used, a lot of cases initially, consumer electronic grade materials to prove their design. So things have improved drastically that you can now design completely differently. And this is where you get those disruptions in innovation, where you look at something that's come before and you say, you know what? We built that based on models that came before. We need to disrupt that and do something completely different. So I tell you that story just to say that innovation is both. It is continuous improvement, is that continual improvement over time, that dogged discipline to make something better, but it's also the radical disruptive changes. But it's not innovation until it provides value. So the SpaceX launches, they want to get the economics down to about 40 million per launch, 400 million per launch with the old technology, so 1/10. So what that's going to be able to do in terms of tech and space, spacefaring humans, it is a new era really of the space race for us. So to get maybe a little less academic, or maybe a little more depending how you look on it, why is innovation important to an economy? It's innovation and new ways of operating that drives wealth for an economy. And it's the wealth and that generation of wealth that pays for social programs, that pays tax revenues. So we need innovation. We need to continually refresh our economic sectors if we're going to be able to provide value, if we're going to compete worldwide. It is that wealth creation that provides a standard of living for an economy over time. And if you look at any advanced economy around the world, they're looking at innovation and technology and how they apply it to traditional sectors. This is the sector they compete on. All OECD countries, those 16 developed nations, they have a tech innovation focus. So here, back in 2014, I was traveling across the country, and I just doing the travel circuit and speaking circuit. People would always talk, well, in Canada we got a wealth of natural resources, tech and innovation is not as important. The problem is, like in 2014, we don't control commodity prices. If we operate an economy that cuts down trees, digs up rocks, pumps oil and sells it on world markets without adding value to resources, if we operate just a natural resource economy, we'll see the shocks like we did in 2014 when the oil and gas price bottomed out completely. So these were the type of images that were going around in Alberta at the time. Right? This was the oil and gas vehicles, the massive trucks. I mean, a person standing on this would be about that high, by the way. This was some of the fields. Literally, they weren't operating. They couldn't break even. The economies just didn't work. And this happened within about a 2 or 3 month period. I had a company, we went to Alberta in October of 2014, just when the price was sliding. One of the oil companies out there flew 36 of us on their corporate plane up to the oil sands for a tour for the full day, flew us back, fed us, took care of us. I don't know what that cost. I mean, it had to be a bloody fortune. Within 3 months, I had heard he didn't know if he could renew his membership with our organization, which was about $5,000. So how drastically things changed. This is why we can't just focus on natural resources. They're important. Absolutely, we have a wealth of resources. We need to leverage them. I love the natural resource sector. I want to be clear on that. But we need to fire on more cylinders than just the natural resource sector. So this was Alberta. And this was what was going around in Newfoundland at the time. Read that. Yeah, I don't know if the camera probably can't see it. The moose is saying, we'll do moose stuff for money. I didn't put this out. This was somebody on Facebook, and this kind of made its rounds at the time. It just showed you that shock of the economy and how commodity price, just focusing on commodities, is not a sustainable advantage for an economy. So I'll show you a quick video. I just want to show you how quickly things change. So this is Peter Mansbridge, for context. This was the first, his first interview about the internet, 1993, okay?
There's a revolution going on in rec rooms, offices, and classrooms around the world. A revolution in which 15 million people are taking part. They're sharing scientific data, arguing philosophy, or passing on cooking tips and gossip, night and day through a computer network called Internet. For about $200 a year, they log on to personal computers connected to phone lines and communicate across cultures and continents. Bill Cameron has this report on the growing phenomenon of Internet.
For years they've been saying these things would change the world, would mature from adding machines and typewriters to tools of the human spirit. Now, maybe it's coming true because of Internet. Internet is a growing grid of independent computer networks interlaced. It's evolved from a U.S. military bulletin board in the 1970s to a worldwide computer switchboard.
Two ways. You can either go and...
You need a computer and a phone, and suddenly you're part of a new mesh of people, programs, archives, ideas. Playwright and internet enthusiast John Allen says it feels a bit like everyday human fellowship, but it's bigger and more precise.
You can walk into a bar and decide that you want to have a conversation about football today, because we're just at a football game, and there might be 2 or 3 people who want to talk about football in the bar, but it'd be very difficult to find them. In this world, there's a table with a big sign on it saying football, and there's about 150 or 1,000 jocks from all around the world who want to talk about football. So you sit down, you say, what do you think of the Raiders?
Just for context, 1993, right? And when I give this presentation to younger folk, they think, well, that was ancient. That was, but you know, we're not 25 years ago. I mean, we didn't have the technology. And you think about how quickly things change within a decade. You think about companies like Apple, you know, Google got around 2003, started to get their big growth, but Microsoft, obviously Bill Gates, all those companies, it's just incredible how quickly things changed. Just bear with me, I'll pull the presentation back up. And you know, we can laugh and chuckle that he calls it internet, but you know, when did the convention, the internet, start? You know, who started? So you think 25 years, how much changed? And that brought in such an onslaught of new innovation and technological change and advancement and quality of life for large portions of the population of the earth. I would argue that the change we're going to see in the next 2 decades are going to be completely out of this world, more than we've seen over the last couple. And the difference is, you see of all the new kind of technologies that the internet, the infrastructure of the internet, what it allows, you know, these are just some of the trends, some of the tech changes we're seeing. The big difference is the convergence of all these things together. So autonomous vehicles really, you know, involves cloud computing. It involves obviously programming language. Involves cameras around a vehicle. So much. It involves microdata. There's so much that goes into creating an autonomous vehicle. It is really the culmination, the convergence of technologies together. So the next 2 decades are going to be drastically different. But there is a great quote that says we tend to overestimate the impact of technology in the short term and underestimate the impact in the long term. And I would argue that's true. In the 90s, everyone thought, oh, look at the internet, we're going to be flying, you know, we're going to be on the moon, we're going to be doing this and that. Like, things take time, yes, but in the long term, things are drastically different. So I would hold that quote close at heart. So how do we compare how does Newfoundland compare? How does Canada compare globally? So if you think about technological change, innovation as being a continuum, you start with an idea, you want to develop it, you want to apply it to a business challenge, then you want to kind of go to market, or it could be a social enterprise. You know, you have an idea, how do you apply it to a population base? How do you see value for that? How do you extend it? How do you go, bring it to other groups around the world? How do we perform in Canada on that value chain of idea to commercialization, or idea to application to a real problem? So this is the Canadian conundrum, is we're very good at pure research, we're very good at ideas, we're smart people, but traditionally we haven't done well at extending that and providing value. Our issue has been that scale up, that commercialization, solving problems. We're very good at the ideas side, not so good at the social economic impact side, which is where most of the value creation comes from our economy. So when we think about how do we compare, this is a Canadian challenge. It is getting better. This would have been, our story absolutely through the 2000s, 2010, 2011. It is getting better. I would argue that we're kind of starting to see B's, BC's coming here in terms of rankings, but it's a challenge for Canada. So where do we fare well, and where do we fare well in Newfoundland? We can talk about all different types of stats and measures. One of the ones that I love and that people really look for is entrepreneurial ambition, and it's that sense for people to want to go into business for themselves, to feel that the risk is worth it, that if I have an idea that I can achieve, I have that ambition that I can go into business for myself, that I can launch a new company, or I can join a company. They have that ambition. In Canada and in Newfoundland and Labrador, we fare very well. I mean, I know it looks like we're far down here, but compared to all the other OECD countries, so the developed nations around the world, we fare very well in Canada, and our provinces fare very well. Importantly, the counter stat to this used to be business creation. So they have the ambition. Do they actually create companies? And the answer is yes, that's improving as well. We see more and more that our business creation, new startups that are sticky, that stick around. We are seeing improvements, and we're seeing more companies scale, particularly here in Newfoundland and Labrador. We're seeing that groundswell. We're seeing the success, which is a good sign. So we have the ambition. We're creating businesses. The other issue we always had in Canada was capital. We didn't have enough risk capital. Banks don't want to put in money into risky ventures. They like to have secured assets, traditional banks, I should say. So we need risk capital. I traveled the country back in 2009, 2010, 2011. The number one challenge was no capital for companies, no money for them to scale and grow. That has drastically changed. Right now, Canada is second. So these are provinces, obviously. Canada's ranked here second, only behind the US in terms of venture capital. This is out of the OECD developed countries. So we have a lot of capital that's flown into Canada, a lot of capital that we're actually helping to create here. So BDCs, Fund the Funds program, and others, we're seeing a lot more venture capital, which is fantastic. Here locally, Polaris, Killy Capital does an amazing job with our local tech companies as well. So we have better capital. And when you want venture capital, it's not just the money. What you really get is the business expertise, that acumen, that discipline to understand how to run a business, how to scale it, how to grow it. You want that as much as the money. The asterisk here in Canada, I would say, is some of our VC, a nice chunk of it is coming from Silicon Valley North, and obviously places like Boston, Cambridge North, but it's a good news story. Just to show you a sense, I went to Israel a couple years ago, and they're not part of these. They don't get included in the 16 OECD country, but their VC world is incredible. What they're doing in Israel is incredible around attracting foreign investment. But to give you a better sense, how does California match up? So, you now have to talk about companies who want to go to Asia, who want to go to foreign markets. If your first step is often, you're better off to go to California, because all the tech scouts are there anyway, and that's where the capital is. That's, and it has its own issues. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of people wanting to live the dream, and I got the next big thing. But it is a special place for innovation and tech. That just gives you a sense of the capital. And a lot of California capital is coming into BC and Alberta and coming across the country too. So where do we fall short? Businesses spending money on R&D and innovation is a challenge, and this is a Canadian problem. So our companies relative to peer countries, tend to hold cash more. don't tend to invest as much in R&D and innovation relative to other developed nations around the world. So, and I'm talking about businesses spending a portion of revenue, spending business dollars, not just, well, if the government gave me more money, I could spend it. I'm talking about businesses spending money on R&D. Counterpoint is we spend our government and higher education R&D is very strong, which is why we see we're good at ideas, not so good at driving growth in our companies. So that's a challenge, a conundrum for our country. It's starting to tick up. It is improving, but it is a challenge. And you'll see here after 2001, we always lagged the OECD country average, but after the dot-com, we really got scared and continued to slide. The other area where we're seeing improvements, but is ICT investment. This is companies adopting technology to transform their businesses. So this is more a story of those outside of the pure tech sector. It's companies that may be in oil and gas, maybe in aquaculture, maybe in manufacturing, maybe in the service industry. Companies adopting technology to make them more efficient, to add more value, to try new things. We have tended to lag. That's another challenge that we see in Canada. So we need our companies to adopt more technology, which is why I'm saying every sector to be competitive, adopt technology. So recent successes, I'm almost done. I'm going to get some questions going. Recent successes, if you haven't been following the news, just type in technology, Newfoundland, and just type it in. Put a month, put September, October, November. Some of the recent things just over the last couple of months. So Verifin, $515 million in a recapitalization deal, biggest in Canadian history. $515 million. I mean, that's $500 million, right, in a recap. Biggest in Canadian history. And even more telling, they had $60 million about, 5 years ago maybe? Something like that. They had $60 million. It's the same partners, which is virtually unheard of in deals like this. Usually partners want their exit. VC partners want to get their exit, and a couple of other partners come in to the group. They've kept their partner, which is amazing. That just tells you the confidence the VCs have in their ability to scale and grow even further. Collab Software, great Newfoundland company. If you haven't heard them, Adam Keating, I nominated him for an award lately. I'm hoping he's one of the top 30 under 30. Adam Keating and his partner in the business. $2.7 million capital deal just came out of Y Combinator in California, which is a huge deal to get accepted into the Y Combinator in Silicon Valley. Kraken Robotics, just I don't know the exact amount, I just have the tagline, $35 to $40 million contract. They also have a new Ocean Supercluster, that's with the OSC, new project with the Ocean Supercluster. CDL Atlantic, that's Creative Destruction Labs. You basically go there to Halifax, you pitch your business ideas, and there's a lot of investors. And actually some of our local people are involved as well, like Kathy Bennett, for example, and some others are involved in CDL. Mark Dobbin, some great business people here in the community are really supporting our tech sector. So you go, you pitch your idea, you get funding. 5 of the 10 companies that were just accepted were from here. So CDL Atlantic's 4 provinces. 5 of those 10 were from here. We've got companies getting something to propel ICT, Andrew Sinclair, his company. We also have Breathe Suite, which benefited from work that Andrew Smith here, and we've done at NATI. They just got in $550,000. I think he's 23 years old, is that right?
He just graduated.
Just graduated. So just given $500,000. For example, the Collab Software, I think Adam's 26, 20, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't say that, but I mean, amazing potential for these companies. Then you got Genesis Center. If you don't know who Genesis are, they're the technology incubator at Memorial University up in Amera Innovation Exchange. They incubate young companies for up to 3 years and offer other program supports for young companies to scale and grow. They just got recognized recently. UBI Global, I think it was, recognized them as just one of the top incubators to watch. Doing fantastic work. I think they have 24 companies now that they've incubated. You've got Memorial Center for Entrepreneurship, MCE, which gets students that consider careers in as an entrepreneur, frankly. They were just named globally top 5 new entrepreneurship centers in the university. They were top 5 globally, just recognized. They're here. And the public doesn't know this stuff. So you got, our industry tech support system has never been stronger. And that's why you're seeing, I think, all of the great news. And this stuff, by the way, is since September. So this is not that 5-year span. This is since September. So what would I say are the challenges here? I'm just about out of time. I said I have 19 seconds according to that, so I'll turn that off. I'm just about done because I'm going to be about a minute over. So this is Genoa Design. If anyone knows Genoa Design, I think most of you know Genoa. They're based out in Mount Pearl. Just had a brand new facility, amazing company to work for. I visited. We had our board orientation session there in August, and we had a tour. This was a room. So they just beautiful new building redone. This room was completely empty and built for the hires they're going to hire this year. So they're hiring 40, 50 people this year. That's just Genoa Design. So I've had to take a picture of the room. Apparently that's filled now. They almost have all the hires done. They've got 30, 40 people brought in this year already. I think they were at 175. They're probably going to be up over 200 if they're not already there in the next couple of months. That's just Genoa Design. So these are high-paid, well-paying, great jobs, great experiences that these people can take and bring to other companies. So when you hire in this sector, the experience you get to bring elsewhere. The challenge we're facing here is, I go back. So Verifin, they're hiring a few hundred people, minimum. You've got Genoa wanting to hire 40, 50 people this year. Kraken, no doubt, is going to have to hire. You're going to have companies like Breathe Suite's going to have to hire. You've got companies at Genesis that are looking to hire. Avalon Holographics just came out of Genesis. They're up to 55 or 60 people. You got Misa Empowered Homes. I think Misa, they're up over 50 people now themselves. They're probably at 60 or 70. Where are the hires coming from? So our top 5 NATI members, I should say top 5. If I look at just 5 of our NATI members that are hiring the most, they're going to hire a minimum 750 in the next 3 to 4 years. That's just our top hiring companies. I look at companies that Killy Capital invests in. They're hiring, I would suspect, in the hundreds, a couple of hundred people that they invest in as well. So these are tech jobs. This is pure tech, not to mention other sectors of the economy that are going to need tech people. So we know the minimum is 750. Brookfield Institute predicted 2,000 over the next 5 years. The numbers are staggering. So how are we going to get there? This is where I really come down to our recommendations, and this is my final piece of the presentation. Reskilling, getting people to retool, to reskill that may have been displaced in other areas. It's going to be a big part of it. Leverage the underemployed or unemployed. Think about tech. You don't have to live in St. John's. You can have, if you're a single parent who's taking care of a child, young children, and you want to work 2-3 hours a day, you want to work half a day, you can do that in tech. There's opportunities for that, and I think us as supports like CSC, NATI, others, we can help bridge some of those gaps to get people like that working, contributing to the economy and working for our companies. It doesn't have to be you got to live in St. John's and go to an office and work 40 hours a week at a desk. Tech allows you to not to have to work that way. I'm an example of it. I worked out of Ottawa and lived here for years. Leverage underrepresented groups, and I think there's a lot of barriers, and there's other people in the room here that could speak more eloquently than I could on this. But we know women in tech is abysmal. They're 4 times less likely to consider a career in tech. I think the enrollment rate right now is 33% of tech enrollments in, I think it's Atlantic Canada was the cohort group, but 3% enrollments into tech. We need to get more women to consider careers in technology, which is really a K-12 system thing, getting at them before gender bias sets in. That's a big part of this. Produce more grads from post-secondary. The College of North Atlantic has a new 3-year co-op developer program. Fantastic. Yep.
Paul, can I just interrupt for a second? When you say underrepresented groups, don't forget people with disabilities that
absolutely
can't get mainstream jobs, right?
Yep.
But they're great employees.
I would have actually said, just in terms of timing, I would have talked about Indigenous is another great example. Those with disabilities, those who need other workplace supports, women in tech is part of it. Whole host, absolutely, completely agree. Yeah. Produce more grads, so the college's 3-year co-op program. So we're 3 years out from getting those grads, but that's a great step forward. Memorial University is looking at how they get more grads produced. That's more medium term. There's going to be a big role for private colleges. Think private colleges in this province, coding boot camps, etc., and private businesses to offer support. There's also going to be obviously immigration and immigration pathways to get immigrants to come and stay especially those with strong technical acumen, or even just business acumen, period. We're gonna need them. The K-12 system is also key. We need to make sure we're getting coding in schools, that we're talking about tech-based careers in schools. Not everyone's gonna be a coder. It's also just, I can't code my way out of a paper bag, and I've worked in this sector for 16, 17 years. So there are many different types of roles in tech, not just coding. So getting students, getting young people in K-12 to see that. I can spit stats at you all day because I think my mind tends to work that way. I'll play this after, little video after. We think about how bad is the problem. We're hiring all these people in tech, yet our unemployment rate in Newfoundland is over 13%, but there is an urban-rural divide there, right? St. John's is over 7%. So we know we need to somehow get rural Newfoundland working in the tech sectors is something that I believe. So we have an unemployment rate, so there's a mismatch of skills in the jobs we have. We got to figure that out. The other thing I'd say is our target is to bring in 1,700 immigrants a year to the province, but we're losing about 6,000 people a year from our labor force because of our aging population. So that's still a net 4,300 people that are leaving the labor force. So we got a challenge there. So we know the demographics, we know the numbers don't help. So it's retraining, retooling, reskilling, working with organizations like CSC, Women Resource Development Corp, ANC, and the work you guys do. There's a lot of opportunity here, I think, to solve the talent gap and get people working. So I'll stop. I'm about 3 or 4 minutes over. I wanted to stop. I know we said we have till 11:30, so we've got lots of time for Q&A. Open it up to the floor if you had questions. Please.
Well, at the beginning you mentioned there's like 4,000 jobs in Newfoundland in the tech sector. How does that compare per capita with other provinces and nationally?
Yeah, I don't know in terms of, I'm sure I could get the data. I will get the data. I'll see if I can find it. I don't know per capita how we average out. I know salary we're above average. I know that for sure. And that's because we don't have enough for the jobs. It's supply and demand is part of it. So that would tell me that we likely have less per capita, if I were to guess. But I can try to find a stat. I just don't have it. Yeah. I know the size of our tech sector is strong and healthy compared to other provinces, but labor's a challenge. Yeah, please.
Hey. I was just wondering what the conversation looks like with the university with regards to expanding the class size, and what is the timeline for that, and I guess why are they lagging? Yeah,
that's a big question we get asked a lot. I get asked the question, what can we do? We are working with Memorial. They do have an advisory group that's looking at how to get more computer engineering, computer science grads, period. Part of the challenge that all universities are having, budget cuts is one of it, so they're getting less money. And there's also a challenge in the tenure system in a university where you get tenor, and you've got your job is secure and protected. And if you want to try to teach different skills, do you have the right teaching professionals that can teach the skills you're going to need?
True.
So they got diminishing budgets, potentially a mismatch. I'm not saying this is just Memorial because it's not, but it's the model. It's the model of post-secondary. They just can't go out and get 3 more professors and bring them in and start teaching twice the class numbers. Yeah. So we're working with them, and they are, to their credit, they're trying to figure out how they can make this work and get increased class. I think there is a bump actually in the next cohort. They have done a good job of getting more students enrolled, but we'd like to see them produce 3 or 4 times as much.
And they're producing what, like 40 grads, did you say?
Yeah, I think between the college and the university up to last year would have been 50 between them. I think computer science last year might have been 17, something like that. Memorial might have produced, 40 or 50 from computer engineering, computer science. It's not a large number. I don't know, Jack, if you've got better data from the college, but.
The college probably produces 15 last year, and Memorial is about like 20 or 30 compared to Nova Scotia, which would do 1,300 graduates per year. So I mean, we're way down, obviously.
For the anyone watching online, for the benefit of those online, 1,300 was the stat just given for Nova Scotia that are produced, compared to about 50.
Nothing.
Yeah. The asterisk on that is they do a great job of attracting immigrant students, and a lot of them do get educated and move on to bigger centers. That does happen, but still. Yeah, so in terms of time frame, that's the question. That's why I put up here private colleges, private businesses. Like the university, university academia is not supposed to just be for business. That's not their job, is to support the business economy. But producing grads that can support growth in sectors locally, I mean, they got to do that, and they're trying to figure this nut out. It's going to be minimum before they can really scale. We're talking years, not a year from now. It's going to be a challenge.
Has there been any, have you heard of any of these private colleges or programs? I've seen some of the coding boot camps where you can go in there, and I don't know if they're a few weeks long or a month long, and they try to give people the skills to at least start, a basic role somewhere. Yeah. But what about like a private college or program? Has there been any talks of something like that opening? Or?
There have, yeah. So there are strong existing private colleges here. Kean Tech, Academy Canada. I've had discussions with both, and I think that's going to be how we fill our tech gap. Is going to be the role of a private college or private businesses that do things like coding boot camps. Not just coding; it frankly is other skill sets too.
Yes, yeah.
So I think if you fast forward to a year from now, I'd be able to say this program and this program currently are producing. So we're working on all that stuff. Yeah. Please in the back.
For us who live in Newfoundland, we know that Newfoundland, rural Newfoundland, as you mentioned, is way behind in employment, and it's dying. A lot of places are dying a slow death because of aging populations and no industry. But it seems like this technology is the way, could be the wave of the future for a lot of these small communities. Because with technology, you can work from anywhere. I have a nephew who's worked home office for a company in somewhere in the mainland for the last 20 years, and you're going to see a lot more of that in the future. So. Is there you guys have any plans to work with, development associations in other provinces to try to look at this idea of, bringing tech to rural Newfoundland and keep young people there and not bring them back, kind of thing, I think that's certainly a good possibility for Newfoundland. Quality of life, that kind of stuff, but people don't want to be in the big cities necessarily.
Yeah, and we have. I was in Corner Brook. And I have maybe a vested interest because I grew up, born in Cornwall, grew up in St. Anthony, lived in Fogo, lived in here a couple times. I have 4 nieces born in Goose Bay, Labrador. So I have a vested interest in seeing those small places, I guess. I have a bias towards seeing those small places do well. So the answer is yes. In Corner Brook, the Workforce Innovation Center at the College of North Atlantic, that's where they're housed. They're doing amazing things to shine the light on potential. How do we innovate in the workforce? I've been out in Corner Brook, Gander, and Grand Falls and presented. I'm planning to go to Goose Bay, Happy Valley Goose Bay in a number of months. So there are opportunities there, and part of it's getting the message out like this, that there's jobs.
Of course, it will take a lot of groups working together on that one, to make it work, but
Yeah, I can tell you, we have a couple members. One of my board members, I can't say who, but he's literally looking at doing this, setting up a couple of offices in rural Newfoundland purposefully and trying it and saying, I want to see who I can get. And work ethic or work output, given that they're separated from the main, can they have the same experience and produce the way you could if you were together as a group? He's looking at doing the same thing.
How maybe that person could work with us up to college?
Oh yeah?
We've got a lot of different initiatives starting right now around the tech sector, right across the island. Of course, we have 17 campuses. But we're also offering programs so that the teacher might be in one location, students could be in 4 locations, because we have the technology in the classrooms now.
Absolutely.
So you can have 5 students here, 3 students here, but that technology then could work with the company as well,
Awesome,
so that they have connections. So
And I don't.
very helpful if they work with us.
I don't think I can say yet, because I know there's 2. Yeah, I signed 2 letters of recommendation for 2 of your programs yesterday. I won't talk about it because I know you guys want to do the press release. So there's a lot. There's more. Hats off to the college because they are really trying to. I think we had a question. I think you might have had a question.
No, I just wanted a final comment about younger people, like you talked about the K-12 system. It surprises me that more young people who, essentially you've got a generation who've grown up with computers and they're very, savvy in terms of their use, but I'm surprised that more of them aren't going into, technology as a career. And I'm not sure why that is, but you're right, you need to get into the school system and educate them about the opportunities, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's what's around them, I think you might have had a question.
Yeah, I'm just a bit intrigued about the need for skill sets in these companies, and it's very impressive to see these companies and growth and opportunities in the province. But is it that they're looking for specific niche, innovative skill sets now that they obviously can't get when they go to the street? Because if it's innovative, then obviously the training behind it hasn't come because the new technologies haven't been there. Is it because they're looking for specific skill sets that they can't get, or maybe an unwillingness to bring in and invest in a bit of risk and then train within? Because we see, at least from the provincial government side of things, on entry-level positions, we see a significant volume of applicants. We might see an open opportunity for an entry-level position. We might see 100 applicants.
Yeah.
So there's 100 people out there interested in working in the IT sector, and I'm assuming that if they had the skill set that these companies were looking for, they'd be looking out in these areas. But I suspect they're not even applying because they sense as though they don't have those skill sets. So it seems as though there's a foundation there of people willing to work in the industry, but not quite matching up. So I think in some ways that's the gap that needs to be filled. Not that the people aren't there, or at least in the early days, there seems to be a few people around willing to do that. So I'm not sure how you bridge that, because they've already gone through the college system. They've got their basic skill sets. They're ready to go, and they feel like they're trained, and they're looking for those traditional type jobs to get them started, but they're not getting them, and then they're moving off the province, right?
Yeah, I mean, and frankly, when I did the recommendation slide, that's exactly why I put reskill, training, leverage, for that reason. That is, there's 13% unemployment. There's a cohort of people that can work.
Right.
And an example is, I don't know, hear the stat, there's 800 electricians unemployed or underemployed in the province. Like, if they can do an electrical program, they can likely do some kind of applied tech, whatever it is. So I think to answer the question, I think there is a mismatch there. Companies like Verifin, Genoa, they are doing in-house training. So we need more development talent, period. We need more sales, SaaS-related sales, specific business sales acumen, period. When it gets into the niche stuff, that's where a lot of companies are providing their training. I mean, Verifin does that for a lot of their people. When you get customer success, they got a great program for how to do stuff like customer success. And so I think you're right, retraining specifics, but they're not finding the base skill sets they need for the hires. Do you have a question, Penny?
Well, as a comment as much as a question, we know that in the nonprofit sector, we probably employ more people than any other industry sector in the province. So we've got at least 16,000 people who work in our sector on an annual basis. Quite a few of those jobs would probably be produced through government grants and support and so on. So for me, there's a huge opportunity here for rethinking how we're hiring in our sector. So for instance, we may be in the summer hiring people to do tourism, but we may not be thinking about how we can use technology and match some of those people in a different way. So it seems to me there's a wonderful opportunity here to do some really significant planning. And you talk about that company that's going to open a couple of offices in a couple of rural communities. There's not a rural community in Newfoundland that doesn't have a nonprofit organization. And people who are willing to try to drive the development of those communities. So I think we probably need to start if culture eats what for breakfast? Strategy for breakfast. I'm going to say that strategy and culture probably need to go together here, and we maybe need to be talking about lunch and dinner as opposed to just breakfast, because I think we have huge opportunity here to really do something significant together. And as Trudy mentioned, there are the colleges that have opportunities. The community sector, working with the provincial government now, is working on developing ways in which we can increase the employment in our sector. We have great opportunities to develop training programs. So we all need to get together to figure out how we make this stuff match.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you started off, one of the points you made in the beginning, I was at the Center for Skills, Future Center for Skills. My old colleagues from the conference board were down with a bunch of others.
As were many of us.
Many of us were in that, and I thought it was fantastic how they showed and proved. And there's another guy that was there, another session I went to as well. I forget the guy's name, out of Toronto. He's an immigrant into Toronto, moved there in his late teens. Anyway, but he could show that he did an assessment of job ads. There's still a tendency here to every job ad, you put in as a criteria, the qualification, you gotta have a degree. When in fact, you probably don't need, there's a combination of a certificate with experience, and I think that is, so to your point, I think there's absolutely, some people are self-selecting out because they might not have a computer science degree, but they got a 3-year and an apprenticeship as an electrical consultant or as an electrician period, and they can be trained in a hurry.
May I just follow up on that? Because it seems to me that our formal educational systems are still working toward degrees and certificates. It's really tough for them to do the little pieces, which is what I think you're talking about, where people don't need the degree, they just need particular kind of professional development.
Absolutely.
So that's probably a lot of rethinking we need to do in terms of how our money flows for education and how our educational facilities are permitted to make changes.
I mean, I'm gonna say something now, and I don't necessarily support it, but I'll say it. There is a trend, especially in the hotbeds of innovation, for people not even to go to university. They come out of high school and they just go do a number of coding boot camps, and they get hired in Silicon Valley and can go in and make a lot of money. I mean, in $150,000, $200,000 within 6 months of getting hired. And that's what they do. They bypass university. Now, it's a bigger issue in the US because the cost of education in the US is atrocious compared to here too. But yeah, you're seeing that stuff.
Just watch for those bits coming from the College of North Atlantic. We'll be launching some of them
Well,
soon.
I was really speaking on your behalf, trying to
no, they'll be launched soon.
I know two, but I won't talk about them.
Yeah, there's some coming.
There's other stuff as well.
But also, what I really want to point to is the need to engage the K-12 system. That's really, we need to engage these people at an early young age. If we look at, you talk about Nova Scotia, just another example over there. They partnered with IBM for these P-Tech schools. IBM has 180 schools across the world. Now they just launched 4 in Nova Scotia this September. Rural communities for 2 of them, one in Yarmouth, an Indigenous community of Escazone in Cape Breton. 30 students per site will graduate now in grade 12 in 4 years' time with their K-12 diploma and a 2-year diploma at the same time from Nova Scotia Community College. Enter IBM or other sectors at the same wage and starting salary as those with a degree.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah.
We need to engage K-12, get programming like that here in Newfoundland and Labrador.
We had meetings with IBM just
Yeah,
recently.
we just met recently with IBM, hoping to
going.
try to get down that sector as well, sort of as a college. But this is what we really need to get our K-12 system engaged right now on this.
How much of this is PR? I think back to, I'm gonna age myself now, in '79, when I did computer science degree at MUN, there was 500 of us in the class.
Wow.
Right? 500 students, 3 women, but anyway, 500 students at the time. What is the difference now in the awareness? I know we went through a whole bump in the 90s where there was no jobs in IT, that whole perception. But how much of this is PR and getting out to the right information in the media about the jobs, like the great stuff you just had there in October?
I think it's a big part of it. I think kids need to understand the opportunity.
Yeah.
And I would say back in the 80s, we had 180 kids in K-12, 180,000 kids in K-12 in this province back in the 80s. I think we're 65,000 in K-12 right now. I don't know, AESL, I think about 65,000. Yeah, I mean, so, but I think it is PR. I think it's people seeing role models, seeing businesses. So if you're in a town that doesn't have a tech company, doesn't have high tech enabled, are you going to think about that's going to be a career for me? Have you had the exposure? We do stuff with Brilliant Labs in K-12 about getting coding in the schools. There's a techno tutors program for older workers, trying to get them to digital literacy, if I can call it that. Did I say that term
that's
properly?
correct.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's PR. I think it's making sure that we're exposing them. Same with women in tech, more Indigenous people in tech, those with disabilities. Fantastic contributions. Yeah, I think there's a big part of it. Yeah.
Well, Paul, the thing with a lot of people with disabilities is that they're already highly educated, a lot of them, because they've had time to go to school to try to improve themselves, and because they can't get jobs, because employers won't give them a chance. So a lot of them are really, when you talk about the reskilling and the retraining part, a lot of them already have, really high skill sets. It's just a matter of probably fine-tuning it a bit, right?
Yeah. Agreed.
I'm just going to be speaking. This is the 4th Industrial Revolution. Any sort of industrial revolution needs talent. We're experiencing a global shortage of technical talent. And I'm just emphasizing, we helped Genoa build up their staff. We've helped Erica as well. But we see in the small and medium sector that engaging international talent is not thinkable of. And the government have wrote this AIPP program to deal specifically with skills and labor shortage and support sectors such as the technology sector to perform. So how would your members be engaging in this sort of challenge? Because everybody's competing on that talent. We're talking Israel, we're talking California, we're talking Germany.
Yeah, Vancouver's saying the same thing because Amazon just put 3,000 jobs in Vancouver. So they're saying, oh, people are getting sucked into Amazon's office. And so it is a global challenge, absolutely. So it's a global fight for talent, absolutely. Which is why I look at the 13% unemployment, so that as a starting point, if we've got an unemployment challenge, there's a latent population that can work. Start from there. Then look at our post-secondary, can we produce more? Look at our private college, look at immigration as well, which is why I had it there. So companies like Verif and Genoa, those that are larger, in particular, I find go global for talent. Vision 33, they have a fantastic company. They've got offices in a number of places. They used to be ZIT, for those who don't know them. They, same thing, so they find talent wherever there is talent. And they bring in talent, so they work with folks like you and others. So I think that's a big part of the equation. The smaller companies, it is a challenge for them. The AIPP program, hats off again to the province too, because I think we actually hit our 1,700 immigrant target. We surpassed it actually, which is great. I think it's 1,800 or 1,900 already. So hats off to the province because they're doing it. But I think it's somehow the small and medium-sized companies got to figure out how they can use that to their benefit.
I had a CEO of a company tell me just yesterday that one of the problems they're having is the people doing the hiring and the people in the company want the person that they're hiring to look just like them, be just like them, from where they're from, that type of thing. So we need to also get into the companies and train them to look globally. When you bring in an immigrant or when you bring in somebody with a disability, think about how you can accommodate them instead of just going to, okay, we're just going to look for people who look just like us.
So to that point, I talk about my 5 companies that are hiring the most. They're going to hire 750, all diverse, all have diverse skill sets, men, women, immigrants, other minorities. They are, I would say they're probably the most diverse. And I know a couple of them are bigger, so that's part of it. But the up and coming companies like Misa Empowered Homes, Colab Software, look at all those companies. Diverse. Look at a picture of Misa Empowered Homes. They just had a picture on LinkedIn outside of their office in the Paramount building. And just look at, this is Misa. It's fantastic. And to your point, the companies, we need more diverse mindsets. Not just diversity, we need inclusion, right? We need to actually leverage the diversity. Yep, Penny.
Another challenge that I've heard referenced within the technical world itself, and I think it becomes a particular problem or challenge for us in the nonprofit sector, is that some organizations are doing the early hiring and the early training, and then bigger companies come along and not only offering bigger salaries, but perhaps even more important, offering better health benefits and pensions and things of that sort. So, I'm hearing from some smaller groups that it's a real challenge for them working in this province now because they're being rated all the time.
Yeah.
So I don't know how we deal with that in our sector, in the nonprofit sector.
Yeah, it's tough, right? Challenge for labor period. We're seeing companies do ESOP programs, the share ownership programs, and how you structure those to keep your key staff. So, it's difficult. It's difficult to operate a business, period, right? And then if you can't find talent you need. I think we have a question up front here. I was going to close us off here. I will show a video on this. I always talked about, you can talk about all the programming elements and you can structure things to fix the state of tech talent. You can do all of the kind of the program and design things and structures and mechanisms that you want, but it still comes down to culture. It still comes down to people. And the best businesses hire diverse people, period. Full stop. And it comes down to that culture of embracing diverse ways of thinking. But I'm going to show you a video that we're still very social beings. So it's incumbent upon all of us to go spread the word of, we need to think differently about how we train, about how we hire, about the kinds of skills we hire. This video for me always kind of proved this point about culture and about the social dynamics of people. So bear with me. This is the impact of social dynamics on behavior.
The gentleman in the elevator now is a candid star. These folks who are entering, the man with a white shirt, the lady with a trench coat, and subsequently one other member of our staff, will face the rear. And you'll see how this man in the trench coat tries to maintain his individuality, but little by little, he looks at his watch, but he's really making an excuse for turning just a little bit more to the wall. Now we'll try it once again. Here's the candid subject. Here comes the candid camera staff, 3 of them at least. And this man has apparently been in groups before. Now, here's a fella with his hat on in the elevator. First he makes a full turn to the rear and Charlie closes the door. A moment later, we'll open the door, everybody's changed positions. Now we'll see if we can use group pressure for some good. Now, in a moment, on Charlie's signal, everybody turns forward. Notice they take off their hats. And now, do you think we could reverse the procedure? Watch.
Anyway, so I show that because there's both a challenge and an opportunity, right? We are social beings. We are influenced dramatically, and this has been proven by others. That can be for good or bad, right? So you still need to be able to challenge status quo and be willing to stand in an elevator facing the opposite direction and not bow to peer pressure. But at the same time, you need to leverage social dynamics and get you all out there talking about the tech sector, talking about the opportunity and about diverse, about inclusive teams and about building that within our tech companies. So it's incumbent upon all of us to get out there and talk about the sector and the opportunity in this area and the opportunity to work together, because then you can incent the behavior you really want to have. So I don't know if we have any closing questions. Certainly, I think I've kept you here about an hour and a half, so it's probably time for a coffee for most. If you saw the little kid picture, that was actually my son when he was 3, teaching my daughter how to use an iPad. That was the that image that you saw earlier.
We all have that picture.
Yeah, which is amazing, right? This was the first iPad generation, but that's him showing her how to use an iPad, and
And now she's doing it.
yeah. So thank you very much, and thanks for listening.
Okay, so I'm going to ask Penny if she would join us to say thank you to Paul, but before that, I'm going to get Paul to draw 5 names from our magic bowl here, and I'll run around like Vanna and give away some
All right.
tech prizes. Amy Henderson.
That's for the $20 you slipped me earlier.
Oh, she slipped me 20 as well. Mike Robinson. Gonna have to put your hand up, Mike. Okay. Derek.
Don't say ASL came and didn't get anything in return.
There you go, sir. And, Andrew from Design. Thank you. And Trudy Barnes. Okay, I'll visit you all. All right, I'm going to introduce you now. And well, Penny needs no introduction, but Penny's going to say thank you to Paul and thank you for being with us.
Anyway, it was great to have you all here. One of the things that I really enjoyed about this morning was seeing faces that we don't often see at the Community Sector Council. I guess because in large part we often deal primarily with non-profits. but we're learning more and more, I think, about the importance of trying to get the intersection, not only between the big sectors, the public sector, the government sector, and the non-profit and business sector, but also different kinds of organizations and people from different government departments. I think what Paul has done clearly is indicated that not only is there a huge challenge, but an enormous opportunity. And if we could think of the ways in which we can leave here today with some tangible next steps. So I think in many ways I may be throwing a challenge out to NATI, Paul. I think most of us think of NATI as private sector. I don't think that's entirely true, but I think that's how we think about you. And typically when you do talk about business and tech sector. I think we probably need to really have a pretty tight look at the opportunities in the nonprofit sector. You've got some extraordinary organizations who are doing really incredible things, huge amount of innovation taking place, and it's where a lot of people who want to be able to work and spread their wings actually land. And many of us stay in our sector, some of us move through, but the fact of the matter is people work in the nonprofit sector because they very often don't have to work in little tiny tight boxes. So I think there's huge opportunity here for us, and I would like to suggest that maybe within the next month, or maybe 2 months, but no longer than that, we should really sit down with your organization and find 6 or 8 or 10 people from our sector or people who we work with and who fund us to really see if there's something specific, tangible, and with some really specific steps that we could be taking, knowing that number one, the province has given us an opportunity in our community sector work plan and a challenge to increase the number of people working in our sector within the next 4 years. We also have the opportunity that CSC has been given to hire people in different parts of the province to do some upskilling. And I think when we think about that, we tend to think about typical things like how do we govern our organizations, but there may be a huge opportunity here for us to connect with the tech sector in terms of how we hire people, and even the kinds of programs that government funds when they give us 3 months or 6 months to hire people. Maybe we could have a slightly different focus than we've had in the past. So I think this has been a wonderful opportunity. It certainly got my wheels turning, and I like to think that maybe others have started to think that through. So I'm actually going to take it one step further because I don't want to put you on the spot. But if there are any people in this room who would like to come together for a further conversation about how we might engage our sector and start connecting with other opportunities, I think that I would love to have you identify yourselves on the way out. And I'm thinking of, I'm sorry, I missed your name, but I'm thinking about the work that you do in the provincial government when you're hiring. And you talk about you have one job and you have 100 applications. That's a huge piece of information, and we probably need to figure out how we can work with that kind of information to train people up for the work that needs to be done. So thank you, Paul.
Thank you very
and
much.
Thank you all for coming.
Yeah.